your choice. So the big picture is, how many ways are there to solve a quadratic? There are 4 ways to solve a quadratic. Let's write that down. Ways to solve, we'll just do quad. And we're going to list them in the order that we learned them. What's the first way that we learn to solve a quadratic equation? Factoring. And then we learn to square root. If it's okay with you, can I just do square root equals square root? Okay. What's the third way? This is the frowny face way. We don't like this way at all. Complete the square. We abbreviate that CTS. And the last way is okay. Some of you will really like it because it is a formula. It's the quadratic formula. You're going to get to choose here. Okay? On your next quiz, there will be specific directions telling you to solve in a certain method, and then there'll be a little section that says solve any way you want. Okay? Now again, my favorite way is factoring, but guess what? All quadratic equations will not factor. Some are prime, and if they won't factor, then you have to do things like complete the square or use the quadratic formula. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to give you my opinion. I know that you're teenagers and you'll choose whatever way you want, okay? But I am going to give you my opinion on some of these. Everybody got it? This slide? All right, so number 84, you get to choose. If you want to do the quadratic formula on every single problem in this section, then you can. Because it says choose the method of your choice. Okay, what I like to do every single time, because factoring is the quickest, easiest way to solve, I always see if I can factor. So if I'm going to factor, I've got to bring that positive 4 over to the left-hand side. If you're factoring, you have to be set equal to 0, because remember, you've got to get 2 factors that multiply to be 0, and then you set your 2 factors equal to 0. Is this going to be an easy trinomial to factor or a harder trinomial to factor? This one's harder because of what number? The 3. So I'm going to do a 3x times an x. Tell me about my signs. They're different. And I've already got this factored. And it factors into 3x plus 2 times x minus 2. And you'll have to check this one because it's a harder one. So do the outer terms in your head. What's 3x times negative 2? Negative 6x. Multiply the inner terms together. 2 times x. 2x. So negative 6x and positive 2x combine to be negative 4x. So I factored correctly. My next step is to take each factor and set it equal to 0. Because I have this rule that says if anything multiplies to be 0, each one of those things can be 0. So I'm not teaching you anything new right now. I'm just teaching you how to choose what's the quickest or the best way to solve. And then, like I said, you're teenagers. You're probably not going to listen to anything that I say. You'll probably choose whatever way you want to. Okay? Factoring doesn't work on every problem. The only thing that works on every problem is the quadratic formula and completing the square. That's why most people, if they're not sure, they just do the quadratic formula because completing the square is too hard usually. All right, let's look at number 88. So 88 is, I'm going to let you guess what you think would be the easiest here. 2x squared equals 250. So we've got, according to our order, factoring, take the square root of both sides, complete the square, or quadratic formula. What do y'all think about this one? Really? The square root property. This one would be very, very easy and quick to solve with the square root property. And this is why you would not get a trinomial if you put everything on one side. Does everybody get that? So the trinomial is a really big clue that you could factor. Okay, you could also factor if you had a binomial, but y'all see there's no x term? There's no x term here. So that's another clue that if there's an x squared but there's not an x, there's a fly attacking me. If there's an x squared but there's not an x, That's a really good indicator that you could just take the square root of both sides. But you got to check to see, is your x squared by itself? Okay, you can't take the square root of both sides until your x squared is by itself. We can fix that by dividing both sides by 2, and we would get x squared is equal to 125. Once the x squared is by itself, then you can apply the square root property, and you can take the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared is x, and then you have to remember to put in plus and minus. 125 is not a perfect square, but 25 will go into 125 5 times. And then we simplify our answer, and we get positive and negative 5 square root of 5. So I'm going to pick one of each. So number 84, I would suggest that you factor. Okay? If you would want to complete the square, I don't know why you would want to complete the square on 84. But I would either factor on 84, or if you want to use the quadratic formula, you can on 84. 88, I would suggest that you divide by 2 and use the square root property. So let me make sure you understand this. If you use the quadratic formula on 88, what would the a value be? 2. What would the b value be? 0, because there is no x. And what would the c value be? Negative 250. So if you use the quadratic formula on that, you would have to set it equal to 0, and you would have to know what your a, your b, and your c was. All right, next one I want to look at is 100. So again, what's my favorite way to solve? Factoring. So I always try to factor first. I got this nice little trinomial here. It's an easier trinomial because it just has an x squared. So I can ask myself what multiplies to be 29 that combines to be negative 4. And there is nothing that multiplies to be 29 that combines to be negative 4. So I can't factor this one. That's not a choice. I can try. So my next thing would be square root property. Can't really use the square root property if you've got a trinomial. So your next choice would be complete the square or quadratic formula. So sometimes I will complete the square if it's an easier one. So would y'all consider this one be an easier complete the square problem? It would be, because x squared is by itself and the number in front of the x is divisible by 2. So I'm going to complete the square on this one. So I'm going to say red rover, send the constant right over. Don't forget, when you change sides, you change signs. So that'll be a negative 29. I bet you can do negative 4 divided by 2 squared in your head and tell me what you get. 4. Okay, so we're going to add 4 to the left and we're going to add 4 to the right. Now we took the number in front of the x, we divided it by 2, and we squared it inside our heads. If you can't do that, you can show it over to the side. All right, now what? Factor, and x squared minus 4x plus 4 factors into x minus 2 equals negative 25. Next step. That leaves me with x minus 2 equals what? Okay, more than that. 5i's right, but more than that. Plus or minus 5i. Does everybody get where the 5i's coming from? All right, last step is x solve for. Nope, so you're going to take that negative 2 and you're going to change sides, so you have to change signs. So the negative 2 is going to move over and become a positive 2, and you're going to write it right in front of plus and minus 5i. Are those like terms? No. Can you simplify in any other way? Nope, so you're finished. All right, so I have showed you an example of 84. What did I do in 84? I factored. In 88, I did the square root property. In 100, I did complete the square. Okay, I'm not going to do another one, but if I did another one, what would it be? Quadratic formula. And I think y'all can do the quadratic formula. Okay? Yes. If you have a negative underneath your square root, you bring that out as an imaginary I, and then we just take the square root of 25, which is 5. So the square root of negative 25 is 5i. Okay, so the first part of your homework, and by the way, this homework technically is not due until Monday, because I won't be here tomorrow to go over it. I won't go over it until Monday, and then we'll take a quiz on Monday. All right, so the first part of your homework says solve each equation by the method of your choice. And so you get to choose here. I'm going to do one more that's just a little bit difficult.
Is this for my homework?
Yes. I'm not finished with notes yet. So just so you don't forget some things that we've already done in previous sections, they throw some equations in that have some denominators. What am I doing? 108. So one thing that we have to do to become better learners is we have to be able to remember things. And it's not like we did it, oh, we did that 2 days ago. Oh, I'm supposed to know that today? Yeah. So if you were solving this equation, you would hate this equation's guts to begin with because it has what? Fractions. Well, we can hate it if it has variables, but every equation has variables. So y'all going to hate every equation? Okay, so we really hate this one because it has fractions. So there is a way to get rid of all those fractions, and I taught it to you. What should we do first? If any denominator is not factored, Stacia is correct. That's who was talking. If any denominator is not factored, you need to factor it first. How does x squared minus 7x plus 12 factor? X minus 3 and x plus 4. Now we're getting ready to multiply 3 by something that will cancel every single denominator out. And what is that? Yes. Who said plus 4? Philip. I believed you. It's okay. I'm just as bad as you are. I believed you. Okay, so we're going to multiply 3 by what? Okay, so I'm running out of room. I'm going to squeeze it in right here. So when you multiply times the first term, what cancels? X minus 3. So that means you've got to multiply your 3 by x minus 4. You're going to keep all this in parentheses. Some of you didn't do that on your last quiz. You're going to multiply times this term, and what cancels? X minus 4. So you have to multiply 5 by x minus 3. When you multiply times the last term of your equation, what cancels? Everything. So you're left with x squared minus 20. So this is just a stinky equation that started out with fractions, and you got to get rid of those, and then you've got to distribute. You got to use all your powers here on this one, and I mean your mathematical powers. Okay, tell me what you're thinking. Combine like terms. That's going to give me 8x what? Minus 27. Tell me what you're thinking.
Distribute the 20 over. Add 20 to the other side.
Okay, that's not a bad idea, but if you're saying move 20 over, you're also going to tell me to move x squared over, and I don't like x squared to be negative. So let's move everything over to the right-hand side. Sometimes you got to pick a side to move, and you want to move where the x squared term is positive. It'll help you out. So you're going to get x squared minus 8x. You're going to move the negative 27, and it's going to become positive 27, and you're going to combine it with a negative 20, and you're going to get positive 7. Okay? And then my favorite way to solve is by factoring. So I'm going to see if this will factor. Are the signs the same, or are they different? They're the same. This is an easier trinomial. So what multiplies to be 7 and combines to be negative 8? Negative 7 and negative 1. Then I take each factor and set it equal to 0. So one of my solutions is positive 7, and then the other solution would be positive 1. So you'll have a few problems that are really, really ugly to begin with, and you'll have to get rid of the denominators. That's an excellent point. What can x not be in this equation? Because there are excluded values. Cannot be. Okay, x cannot be positive 3 or positive 4. So are we okay with 7 and 1? So if you did get an excluded value, thank you for reminding me of that, you would have to throw it out. Okay? Now, I'm almost out of time, and the last thing that I'm going to show you is just very quick. You are going to have some problems where they have some graphs of quadratic equations. So just to remind you, a graph of a quadratic equation is a parabola. Sometimes a parabola doesn't touch the x-axis. I want you to draw these 3 pictures. Sometimes the parabola only touches the x-axis at one point. And sometimes the parabola touches the x-axis at 2 points. Nothing else can happen. It cannot cross at all. If the parabola doesn't cross the x-axis at all, there are no solutions. If the parabola only touches the x-axis one time, then wherever the parabola touches, we'll just say it touches at 4, then your solution for that parabola would be x equals 4. So am I saying where the parabola touches the x-axis is a solution? Yes, that's what I'm saying. So in the last example, it looks like, I'm just going to make up 2 numbers here. It looks like your parabola touches at -2 and +2. So we would have 2 solutions for this parabola. And again, the solutions would be where the parabola crossed the x-axis. I will elaborate a little bit more of this on Monday. Do as much of your homework as you possibly can. I did a really good job of teaching you like 99% of it. Do the best you can. We'll go over the rest of it on Monday.